Exclusive details this morning of how people in Minnesota spend hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars on luxury cars and real estate. Now, this money was stolen apparently from programs that provided services to poor children. Many of the accused are Somali Americans, a fact that President Trump has used to criticize the broader community in general.
A honeymoon in the Maldives, a fleet of luxury cars. Here's a box with more than $270,000 in cash. This was all evidence from a new trove of files obtained exclusively by CBS News, showing how a group of convicted Minnesota fraudsters spent taxpayer dollars. One text message reads, "You are going to be the richest 25-year-old.
We're not even at the end of the beginning of our pursuit of the stolen money and of the people who stole it."
U.S. Attorney Daniel Rosen leads the office digging into the wave of COVID-era fraud that hit Minnesota.
So how much money are we talking about stolen?
I can say with great comfort, well in excess of $1 billion.
In the past 3 years, 87 defendants have been charged, 61 convicted. The majority of them are Somali American. Minnesota has the nation's largest Somali population. The perpetrators are accused of ripping off state-run programs intended to feed low-income kids, house the disabled, and provide services to autistic children.
This was a get-rich scheme.
Andy Luger was the U.S. attorney who first examined this fraud. He left in January.
One of the things we discovered is that a number of the people involved were buying investment property, resort property in Kenya.
Wire transfers reviewed by CBS News also show more than $1 million went to Chinese banks.
It goes behind a black curtain. It's hard to see where things went beyond that.
The Trump administration has said it's investigating whether any of the money fell into the hands of terror groups like al-Shabaab in Somalia. But both Luger and Rosen agree the evidence so far shows the criminals were only interested in getting rich.
There was never anything that indicated that this was linked to terrorism.
Somali leaders worry the community is being held collectively responsible. And this week, there have been ongoing immigration.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Stand and Speak. This is Lad Dilgard. You can find me on X at Lad Dilgard or on YouTube on the Stand and Speak show. So today we're going to talk about the Somali problem, fraud, crime, illegals, and all kinds of other issues in Minnesota, but also in Maine and Ohio. So stay tuned. As Elon Musk said, no immigrant group should be taking out of the system more than they are putting in. As Trump's administration has pursued illegal immigrants who cross the border, the wide open border during the Biden administration, now they're starting to turn to legal migrants who are causing problems, like the hundreds of thousands of Somalis who have resettled in Minnesota, Ohio, and Maine. So Somalis have escaped civil war and famine and corruption in their home country to come here, and they've shown their gratitude by bad-mouthing this country, by adopting far left and communist views, and showing allegiance to their home country of Somalia more than the United States. Over 80% of Somalis are on government dependency, are on welfare or government dependency. And many fraud or crime incidents have popped up and are under investigation in Minnesota, Maine, and Ohio, and which has cost taxpayers, U.S. taxpayers, billions of dollars more. So Republicans are alone in trying to ferret out this fraud and indict the criminals, whereas Democrats are rushing to Somali's defense and saying, we love our community, we love our Somali community. 3 judges in Minnesota have even dismissed pretty obvious Somali fraud charges. One of them even went to a jury trial, and the jury convicted this by the name of Sarah West, dismissed the whole case, even though the jury convicted him. This is unbelievable, and it needs to be fixed. One problem is the Somali community refuses to assimilate. The Somali women wear, I think it's called a dirak, which is a long, black, loose-fitting dress that reaches the ankles. They wear a scarf around their head. It only shows their face. This is not Western culture. This is not Western civilization to have men commanding that women cover themselves all up in public. This is a Muslim tradition, and there are other issues. Female genital mutilation is something that young Somali women girls undergo before they reach puberty. They disappear from school for a couple of months, and everyone knows what's going on. Somali men have multiple wives often. They're polygamists. That's something that Mormons were ostracized and excluded and lynched even in the 1800s for that kind of behavior. So Somalis are used to government corruption. They're used to governments that steal from them, and they are used to stealing from their government. So they've brought that tradition here, and it's not going. So the highest ranking Somali leader is Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. I think everybody has heard her name by now. She comes from the Minnesota's 5th congressional district, which is Minneapolis and portions around Minneapolis. Her net worth has gone from $51,000 in 2023 to $30 million in 2024. So a lot of people are speculating that this money came from the fraud schemes that local Somalis are being indicted for and prosecuted for, that there's money funneling her way. Others are saying that, well, it's just coming from her new white American husband. But whatever it is, $51,000 to $6 to $30 million in 1 year has raised a lot of eyebrows. Also, a problem with Ilhan Omar is her anti-Semitic rhetoric. She's anti-American. She pledges allegiance to Somalia. You could see this and hear this in a number of speeches that she has made. She is hard left, and she's also now under investigation by the Department of Justice for immigration fraud, because it is widely known, she's denied it, but that she married her brother to enable her to come to the United States as an immigrant, and that marriage was dissolved, and now she's remarried. But the DOJ is now asking, did she come here under a fraudulent scheme? And if so, she will be shipped back to Somalia. And we can imagine the explosion that would occur if that. So the fraud rings in Minnesota are, one of them was the largest COVID-19 fraud scream in the nation, something called Feeding Our Future. 47 people were initially charged. Almost all of them were Somalis. A total of 78 have been charged so far. They stole $240 million in federal funds, allegedly, which they used to buy luxury cars, houses, jewelry, and coastal resort properties. That was number one. Number two was housing stabilization services, which bilked taxpayers for millions of dollars of fraudulent Medicaid claims. So what would happen is Somalis would obtain names of eligible people from addiction treatment programs, and then they would submit inflated or fake reimbursement claims. They would get these names from the addiction centers and then bill Medicaid for services that they never provided. The program was flagged because it had paid out 10 times more than was initially projected, and was ended on October 31st of 2025 due to large-scale fraud. So Somalis sniffed out an opportunity there. They sniffed out an opportunity with the COVID-19 funds to just shake down taxpayers. The third one was perpetuated allegedly by someone named Asha Farhan Hassan, uh, around fake autism diagnoses. So she recruited and coached families to fake autism diagnosis to tap into a welfare program that got $14 million from a federal care program. And in return, parents would get a kickback of anywhere from $300 to $1,500 a child. So she would go around, knock on doors, and she would say, why don't you tell the government that your kid has autism? And it was always approved by whoever was investigating. And in return, we'll kick you back some money. So Asha got rich. She got millions of dollars. And the worst part of this is Asha's money, a lot of it was funneled back to Somalia, which they all kind of do. But this was also funneled back to terrorists, the Al-Shabaab gang over there, which is a Sunni Islamist militant group and Al-Qaeda affiliate operating in Somalia. Not our friends. She also used money to buy real estate in Kenya. So federal investigators have said that the Somali crime network runs from Seattle to Minneapolis to Maine. It's a big network, and they're bilking U.S. welfare agencies for money that they get rich on, and then they send back to Somalia, the crappiest and second most corrupt nation on earth, according to the Transparency Project, right under South Sudan. So we're taking all this welfare money from the U.S. taxpayers, shipping it over to the most corrupt country on earth. Here's one from Maine. A 2009 Somali immigrant, Abdullah Ali, started a nonprofit and opened a multi-million-dollar migrant care service agency. So he's getting over $5 million a year from American taxpayers. He's given no bid contracts from the Maine governor, Janet Mills, and is sending money back to Somalia. But it gets better. So this migrant services agency bills Maine Care, which is Maine's version of Medicaid. He's raised that money by fraudulently billing them, Maine Care, and he's bought weapons and munitions and supplies for a paramilitary force. And as he was running to lead the land of Jubaland in Somalia, he's going to be the local warlord. But when you want to win elections in Somalia, you need a paramilitary force to have more guns and a bigger show of force to win that election. So he was using U.S. taxpayer money to build a paramilitary force in Somalia so he could become a warlord over there. This is a guy living in America since 2009. He was buying real estate in Somalia, and he was supported by Maine's Democrat governor. As far as I know, he still is. So as hard as that one is to believe, it is not satire, it's true. So his migrant services nonprofit, Gateway Community Services, this is from my Substack article. If you want to read it, go to my Substack at Lad Dilgard. It received millions of dollars in Maine Care payments, and former employees allege systematic fraudulent billing and overbilling by nearly $1 million in earlier audits. So this one, Governor Janet Mills created the Office of New Americans, whose sole employee, who's from Sudan, is a former Gateway Community Services staffer. So this is funny because this Gateway Community Services runs a get out the vote operation for Maine's governor, Janet Mills. So you see how that works? She looks the other way, while this guy bilks money from the taxpayers, sends it overseas to a paramilitary group, but in return, he organizes get out the vote so she can stay in office. That's a Democrat up there. Maybe that's why Democrats aren't really investigating any of this fraud, but Republicans are.
Hoped
to lead as the president of Jubaland. Yes, that is a real state in Somalia. He was running for president in Somalia. Of course, he lost the election. We reached out to the Gateway Community Services in Maine, which Ali founded, did not hear back, ironically enough. The man who broke this report, editor-in-chief of the Maine Wire, Steve Robinson. Dude, this is crazy.
You really can't make this stuff up. I mean, the guy's running a migrant services agency that bills MaineCare, which is what we call Medicaid, about $5 million a year. At the same time that he's running for president, and to be clear,
in Somalia,
that he's running to be the warlord of Jubaland. Elections in Jubaland aren't exactly like elections in America. It's, whoever has the most guns is able to certify the election. So he needed to buy a paramilitary organization and paramilitary support in order to win that election, and he lost it. But at the very same time that he was in Jubaland and Kenya trying to become a warlord in southern Somalia, he was getting no-bid contracts from the administration of Governor Janet Mills, a Democrat who has been in cahoots with Gateway Community Services from the very beginning. So if there's one thing that I would implore your listeners to understand, it's in Minnesota and in Maine, it's not just the Somali diaspora that has come over here and decided to engage in this criminal behavior. It's an industrial complex with the Democratic Party that enables and turns a blind eye to this behavior because they benefit from it through political support. And indeed, Abdullahi Ali's number two, his assistant executive director, is the former mayor of South Portland, Maine, and is currently a state representative from South Portland and a member of the Appropriations Committee, Decca Delac. One of his former employees, Yusuf, is a representative from Portland. Many Gateway Community Services alums have gone on to become involved in politics, and Governor Janet Mills created the Office of New Americans specifically to cater to the new Americans, new Mainers, illegal aliens, and the only employee of that organization is Elkas Ahmed from Sudan, who is a former employee of Gateway Community Services.
I wish I had more time for this, but you're on a roll. Basically, long story short, is Maine's got a bunch of fraud with people taking money from the government and the taxpayers and then buying rocket launchers, sending them back to run for elections and president of whatever that place is. Jubaland.
And then they're also turning around and getting out the vote for Democrats in places like Lewiston, Maine and Portland, Maine.
Yeah, and when you drive into Maine, there's a big...
So let's turn to Ohio briefly. So fraudulent schemes around Columbus, Ohio is just starting to bubble up, and people are starting to pay attention to it. But Rhino Governor Mike DeWine, he's rushed out to the microphone and said, we really support our Somali community. We're there for them. They've been greatly productive and yada, yada, yada. And also Columbus City Attorney Zach Klein has came out and said the same thing.
Columbus, Ohio, fraud investigators. If you go to the government-assisted housing areas, you will find that most of the housing is Somalians. I would say about 80% of the government-assisted housing in Columbus is occupied by Somalians. And the parking lot is occupied with a whole bunch of brand new cars. And the women walking around have designer purses with EBT cards, and they have Apple iPhones stuck up in their hijabs. Yeah. And then go to the businesses that are owned by the men. Because see, what happens is when you have a restaurant or when you have a little corner store and you have a couple of wives and you only have to claim one, then that means the other wives get EBT cards, and you can use those EBT cards to buy food for your store or your restaurant. Yeah. Or what you can do is you can get a home health aid company. And then you only hire Somalians to work the home health aid. And what you do is you just make sure their paperwork looks right. It don't have to be right, but you just make sure it looks right. And then you send them off for those home health aid jobs. Y'all don't want to talk about fraud.
Between 60 and 80,000 Somalis in central Ohio. And by some accounts, over 80% of them are on some kind of government assistance. according to Columbus police, who some of my contacts have talked to, there's a huge gang problem with Somalis. They're dealing drugs. They've taken over certain schools and so on. And they're very difficult to track because of the names of the Somalis. They have Mohammed and Mohammed and other things. People, the police have a hard time tracking the gang members, and it has become a big problem for the last 20 years that nobody wants to talk about. After we intervened in Somalia in the early 90s, about 5,000 Somalis started being repatriated to the United States, and they were dropped into Minnesota and into Columbus, Ohio. Some of these were called asylum seekers, or that they were a oppressed minority in Somalia. They were targets over there, allegedly. And then they just kept coming. Biden opened up the door, Obama opened up the door, and the trickle became a rushing river, and Somalis located largely to Maine, Ohio, Minnesota, but they're in other areas as well. So this community, and I've got nothing against nobody who wants to come to the United States, pledge allegiance, not be a communist, not go on the public dole, but this community seems to have done everything wrong. Not 100% of them, but a whole lot of them. And, when you import a community that pledges allegiance to their country overseas and would do anything to take our taxpayer money and ship it overseas, sometimes to terrorists, sometimes to warlords, or to build a paramilitary organization, and over 80% of them are on public assistance, I've got a problem with that. And a lot of people have a problem with that. And you can criticize Donald Trump's language. You can criticize anything you want, but something needs to be done about this community. For one, the community's illegal immigrants need to be shipped back immediately. Anyone who violated immigration laws to get into the United States needs to be shipped back immediately. There needs to be a limit on public welfare benefits and a tracing of where this money is going to. And how about polygamy? When did that become okay? So, again, Mormons were lynched for this in the 1800s, but we're allowing large communities of immigrants from Africa to live in Columbus, Ohio with multiple wives. And each one of these wives takes out food stamp cards and funnels them into a business. I mean, this is unreal. So something needs to be done about this. This is just one problem. But if we're going to import immigrants legally, let's have them be a value add to the nation, as opposed to something that's undermining the country that we've had since 1776.
Oh yeah, the Somalians have it figured out in Columbus. I went to the Walmart on Georgesville to see if I could see people filling their carts, or just kind of see what I could see. It's not the way they do it. They've got it figured out way better than that. Every single Somali restaurant has a grocery store right next door or within eyeshot of the restaurant. The specific one I went into today had it attached to the restaurant. And wow, what an adventure that was. Stay tuned for more on that. Anyways, the grocery store and the restaurant were the same building. So they don't have to go to a Walmart or a Sam's Club or a Costco necessarily. They can just order everything they need to their grocery store that's right next to or attached to the restaurant that they also own, and never have to fill a single cart. And I guarantee you, if you looked at the records of those grocery stores, they lose tons of money every year, and it's probably used as a tax write-off because those groceries are being funneled into those restaurants, with a daycare center on the opposite side. And that's the common trend you'll see. There's restaurants, grocery stores, and daycare centers, and also home health care businesses. I can't forget the home health care businesses. Nakia was absolutely right. And the reason for the daycare centers, I found out while I was at Walmart. 3/4 of the workers I saw working in Walmart, especially the cashiers, were Somali women. You got to figure if you have 2 or 3 wives that you don't have to claim, these women can go work at Walmart full time for $15 an hour and still qualify for food stamps as long as they have a couple kids, which you can guarantee you they at least have 2 kids. Hell, they average 7. Or same story as working as a home health care aide. They have most definitely figured out the system and how to take advantage of it. And Columbus doesn't break down its numbers like Minnesota, but if anything like the 88% of the Somali community is on social services in Columbus, I can only imagine how deep the fraud is. So I'm changing tactics and going back up Monday, and I have a couple ideas to see if I can't sniff a few things out.
I'm going to leave you with some other facts regarding the Somali population. Many do not speak English even after being in the country for many years. The adult literacy rate, this is according to Minnesota's Department of Education, the adult literacy rate is below 50%. According to other government agencies, the poverty rate is 58% for the community, unemployment rate 40%, food stamps collected by 42% at least. I think that's much higher. And 41% of the Somali population has not attended high school. And again, I'll show a graph here. Over 80% of Somalis are on some kind of public assistance. So if this, and this is decades after Somalis started coming to the country in the 90s in big numbers. I mean, if these were immigrants from Korea or the Philippines, I've met a lot of successful Nigerians over the years and so on. I can imagine the state of affairs for the areas from which they live would be much better. But if you go through areas where Somalis live, it's not pretty, and it's not getting any prettier, it's getting worse. So I think that something needs to be done to make those citizens agree to live in a Western culture, Western civilization, or send them back to the Horn of Africa, because I don't know what good they're doing here.